About the more not taught in association events, I'd now like to dive a bit deeper into the different event elements. So if you could share insights of what you've learned over the last 21 months on a personal basis, but of course, representing MCI as a global organization. So first of all, learning that is offered at association events, how have you seen that evolve?
Thank you for asking. That's a question I think we would need at least 5 or 6 hours to cover, because and we've been learning so much. Again, we've been changing and transforming as individuals, as an industry, and we've been running events in spaces where we've never been before, especially when we're talking about hybrid, right? So I would say there's 3 learnings that I could share, that are really learnings that have been a little bit outstanding from from what we've been seeing in the past 18 months. So the first one is around backup plans. So I kind of remember the good old times. Let's call it the good old times. Where we were going to events with the first heavy IT infrastructure. And at the time, IT in our world, so it's not so long ago, but we're talking 15 20 years ago. 15 20 years ago, you were not going to run a 10,000 people event in a venue with just a computer. You were coming with servers, with computers, with backup, and then you had a plan A, and then you also had a plan B, and then you had a plan C and D, because you never knew. And guess what? It happened to me one time to have even a plan E and to use the plan E to run the event, because all the others had failed before. And then we've been having that kind of a period of grace of about 15 years where, technologically speaking, and also in terms of planning, we were working on a plan A and potentially on a plan B where we had some doubts, but that was it. Now, this situation today that is connected, it's everything into the same pot where you kind of connect virtualization, hybridation, changing regulations around COVID are forcing us to go back to that habit of having a plan A, a plan B, and also a plan C, and sometimes a plan D, right? So it's more work, it's much more planning, it's much more to the end thinking, because the recent situation has shown that the unpredictable can happen tomorrow. So that's the first learning. The second learning, and that is really something that it's been striking me in the sense that I knew it, but I needed to see it to realize it, is that we are in an industry that is at different levels in different portions of the world has been devastated. So we're talking about associations that have been losing some members, have been losing workforce. We're talking to hotels that have been closing down. We're talking to restaurants that have been firing their staff and so on. And in restarting, we need to understand there's some rust out there. We need to understand that it's not a car that has been parked for 6 months and then you get into the car, you switch it on and it's working. No, we're talking about, on all sides, associations, PCOs, but also participants. We're talking about people that have lost a little bit the attitude to participate to events, to behave in public. And it was surprising to see in the first large face-to-face events we've been running this year again, to see that although all this could have been easily expected, it was a bit surprising to see that people are standing apart a little bit, and and there's no handshake and there's no hugs, and everybody's looking at the way you've been placing catering to ensure that you're not touching everything and so on. So that will most probably leave traces. But what was interesting from my perspective is really the fact that I underestimated the impact, and I underestimated the fact that the whole industry has been hit by that, including associations, including PCOs, including venues. So it's not only a few entities, it's really everybody. And the third learning, which is really interesting, is that we've seen some clients really going, from virtual to from face-to-face to virtual. And then, despite the fact of having understood the interest and the potential of virtual, went fully back face-to-face, right? Because they were in that window of opportunity where they could where they could make it. And what they did is that they forgot the lessons from the past. Is that in reality what they tried to do is to repeat in 21 what they were doing in 2019, and guess what? It didn't work. It didn't work because people are different. The way they consume content is different, right? People got now, in a very short time, people have been used to have content that is bite-sized, that is much easier to consume, that is better produced, that looks much more like a YouTube video than an ex-cathedra presentation of 45 minutes by a very skilled professor. That is, I'm not saying this is part of the past, but this is something that we need to factor in when we look at our target groups and how we deliver our messages, because the way people receive our messages and the way they consume the content we're pushing to them is now different. Whether we like it or not doesn't make any difference. It is different. Our way of consuming content has been changing. The way you are watching YouTube videos has been changing in the past 18 months. So, and we're no different. So those are the three key learnings. It's around, multiplication of backup plan. It's around the whole industry being touched. So expect some rust here and there. And the fact that you can't do in 21 what you did in 2019 and expect the same results.
It seems so obvious, right? But yet it has been challenging for all. Another element, Antonio, that a lot of the associations here in Brazil and Latin America are struggling with, and I imagine it's the same in the rest of the world, is the registration fee. So how to define what they should charge? Should it be complimentary? Should it be same price, more expensive, cheaper? Do you have any insights and learnings, what's hot and not, that you can share?
Yeah. Let me start by a strong statement. What is free has no value. It's very clear, right? And we do have metrics because we've been using the time, to conduct large surveys on events of all kinds: scientific, non-scientific, public, exhibition, trade shows, congresses, and so on. And typically, while free events are generating high numbers of registrations, when it comes to sponsorship and when it comes to engagement, they are underperforming compared to paying events. And there's an easy understanding to that. If we look at sponsors, let's be clear, sponsors are not stupid. They understand that the numbers, in a way, when the event is free, the numbers are a little bit fake. Right? So they're not ready to invest into events where they're not going to be able to put their message in front of the right people. That's what sponsors try to achieve. They have a message. They want to convey that message to the right audience. If we are not providing the right audience because we're opening up registration to almost to the entire world, they will understand that and they will adapt their investment in the same way. On an engagement perspective, very simple. I think similarly to you, I receive dozens of those invitations every day, right? I could participate to 55 webinars every day. So my reflex when it's free is that I register maybe to 5 or 6. I put them as tentative into my agenda, and 95% of the time, I have something more important or more urgent to do than participating to these events. So, and that's exactly the same mechanism. And those that have been active in congresses for years, will understand what I'm talking about. When you have free dinners and where people are expected to register, they register. But when it's free, on their way to the dinner, they meet a friend. The friend says, let's go have a beer, and they go have a beer, and they don't show up to the dinner because anyway, it's free, right? So there's no obligation, and that really is damaging the engagement. So let's start by the fact that we should not have free registrations because we're kind of conveying the wrong message. We might be able to pump up the numbers for year one, but that's not the way it works. Second thing is that clearly what data seem to be showing is that consumers want to see a difference between virtual and face-to-face, right? They want to see a difference, right? And it seems that the difference is around 1/3. Is around the fact that participants are ready to pay 1/3 for virtual participation compared to the face-to-face registration, right? It's kind of a nice number. It's been working very well for MCI in the sense that almost all of our events that have been applying that metric have been increasing the virtual audience compared to the face-to-face, up to maybe even 2 or 3 times. We do have customers that have been able to attract 3 times more participants in the virtual space than in the face-to-face. So, but that is, of course, just, it's a metric. It might not be working for everybody, but what we've seen is others trying other tactics, right? Some have been taking the point that in reality, the most important part of the event is the content. So from the point that you're consuming the content, whether it's face-to-face or virtual, it should be the same price. And that has been kind of proving a bit difficult to sell the virtual portion, in the sense that it's like, I very often kind of take it back to things that I know or things that are kind of easy, and it's like going to a concert. While I would be ready to pay $100 to go and see a face-to-face concert of the Rolling Stones and live the experience, I would find it tricky, if maybe not even, I would be reluctant to pay the same $100 to see the same concert, but on the screen of my laptop, right? Because I would be missing the experience. I'm not going to have a beer with friends, and I'm going to miss merchandising. I'm going to miss, all that thing. So clearly there seems to be a value that is perceived differently. And clearly in the virtual space, registrations are more considered as some sort of a consumer good and are more price sensitive than you would be in the face-to-face space, because there's a reality out there is that in the face-to-face, when you pay for your registration, that is a portion of your cost, because you're going to pay for the registration, you're going to pay for the hotel, the travel, the meals, the little gift you're going to bring back home, and the time you're going to spend outside of the office. So it's kind of melting a little bit. It's kind of hiding a little bit the registration price within a total cost. When you go virtual, your only cost is the registration fee. So it's much more visible, and you're much more sensitive to the price you're paying. So that's a little bit what we've been seeing as the different strategies, is that if you go too low, clearly you're going to be closer to the free registration. So you're going to be increasing numbers, but losing engagement. If you go too high, you're going to be losing registrations in the virtual space that will not most probably convert into face-to-face. Because in reality, in the long run, we kind of start to understand that there's not really a competition between virtual and face-to-face. They are complementary one to the other, in the sense that instead of just going 1 year out of 2, you would go 1 year face-to-face, the next year virtual, the following year face-to-face, and so on. But we hardly see a massive translation or transfer of face-to-face participant in the virtual space, only in the sense that it's simply not the same product. Let's be clear, it's not the same product.
Interesting insights, Antonio, that you bring. You mentioned when we were speaking about registration, the sponsorship element, which obviously, balancing the revenue that is generated. What have you seen specifically for sponsorship? Many of the associations that we have spoken with say it's so challenging to get these sponsors engaged. They have difficulty with their budgets and allocating funds. Others not so much. What is your take on that?
So I think there's a reality that we must admit, is that the first reaction of the industry, so of the sponsors, when going virtual has been to say, "Ooh, we're going to go virtual. It's cheaper. Let's cut budgets." right? And let's cut budget across the board. So not only the budget we were spending on making our participant travel, but also on the funds we were investing in congresses. But the reality is that it is the first and only time, at least in my career, where we have such an opportunity to re-educate the industry and restart sharing with the industry as, as equals, breaking a little bit that master and slave relationship, depending, because it's a master and slave relationship, but the master and the slave are changing almost every day, but we have really the opportunity to re-educate and rebuild our relationship with the industry. Why? First of all, because we need to understand that the challenges that we're facing as an industry, they are facing as well. So the challenges that PCOs and associations and venues are facing in trying to understand this new world and trying to master virtual and hybrid, industry is facing exactly the same. And as MCI, we are also consulting with the industry to try to help them make the most out of their participation to hybrid events, because they simply, nobody knows. So we're kind of having, we're having that those insights conveyed to the industry to help them. The second thing is that companies, have a natural tendency, to be interested in not into virtual and hybrid. First of all, for kind of basic reasons around the products they're selling. So as an example, and that's something, that's a discussion I had recently with a customer, industries, that are selling devices, as an example, see no value in virtual exhibitions. Because when you're selling a device, that could be a scanner, could be, could be, whatever, could be lenses, could be anything around devices that you need to try, test, and touch. When it goes to hybrid and hybridation, they will favor the face-to-face component, because their understanding is that, and I think they're right, is that advertising a device in the virtual space very quickly hits limitations. So that's the second thing. Another thing that's really a message that I'd like to convey is that the money is still there. So industry is not gone. The money is there. It takes more time, more intelligence, more insights, more education and sharing to get the same dollars from the industry, because not only you need to sell and convince, but you also need to explain multiple times about what will be the virtual component, what will be the face-to-face component, what's going to be there for them, what will be their return on investment and their benefit. All the things that you didn't need to explain where you were going purely face-to-face, and that was known for ages. So there was no novelty around there. So I think that the industry is getting to the point that they kind of get to understand that even themselves internally need to make a difference based on what kind of content they're trying to handle and to push. As an example, we kind of understand that content heavy meetings, so really around content, translate much better in the virtual space than experience heavy meetings. Experience heavy meetings, where you need to touch, to feel, the network, to kind of be exposed to brand, they translate much better in the face-to-face space.
Thanks, Antonio. Really interesting to understand your perspective on that. And speaking of the participant, you already spoke a bit about them expecting something different. And could you enter maybe more specifically what does not work for them?
So I think what has not been working, and that's predominantly from the virtual space, right? So what has not been working in the virtual space is that at a point in time, when looking at platforms and when looking at technological solutions, we've been collectively replacing quality by quantity. So in kind of placing on the virtual platform, as it is virtual, it is free, and everybody can access easily. Let's put everything in there. Let's put posters. Let's put abstract. Let's put recordings. Let's put a little bit of everything. And in reality, we've been forgetting two things, three, let's put it this way. We've been forgetting three things. The first one is that quality will never, quality is of the essence. So quantity will never replace quality. It's not because you have many burgers that are not good that you will be more pleased than if you have one that is good. So it's very simple one. The second thing is that we've been forgetting, that, again, how people consume content. That's sitting, and that's connected to quantity. The difficulty is that if there's so much content out there, when do you expect participants to really consume it? So one of the findings in terms of the participant experience is that dropping tons of content out there and hoping that consumer will be happy is a little bit of a wrong approach. The third thing, is really around scenography. So if for those that are now into operations at events, you kind of know how much time you spend in designing your visitor experience. You look at the venue, they're going to enter by that door, they're going to see that signage, then you want them to go to the registration, then they're going to go to the session room, but they're going to pass by the exhibition and then stop by the poster area. So there's really some sort of a scenography, a choreography that you put into that when you go face to face. But guess what? When going virtual, we forgot to do that. As an industry and as platform providers, many have forgotten to do that, which means that you land on a page and then you have to find your way, right? And that is simply impacting, from my perspective, a little bit negatively the experience of the participant, because participants, it's not that they're stupid, but they need to be shown the way. They, most of the time, that's the raison d'être as an example, when you have visitors agendas and you kind of are trying to propose content because you kind of say, well, Antonio likes this, and this, so I think I should tell him that he should go watch this session, visit that sponsor, and watch these two posters. And we've been forgetting that a little bit in the virtual space, despite the fact that technologically speaking, it was easier to realize.
So in what you're explaining, really the participant experience and the importance of data, right? That is becoming more and more important. Have you seen associations paying more attention to that as well, the data collection, or do you think that's something more of the future?
I think it's a twofold answer, so a threefold answer. There are associations that have been very early in understanding the importance of data. And surprisingly, I could cite more than one example of associations that have got that into that very early. And then, as they didn't understand what to do with data, they just abandoned it. Because in reality, if you think about data, first of all, it is very surprising that we do not have primarily data-driven decisions, right? Because it's basically the way we would work, not work as human beings, is that we have information, and based on that information, we make decisions, right? And sometimes in the association space, there are decisions that are made that are not based on data, either because if you don't want to base them on data, that's absolutely okay. But most of the time, it's because either you don't have the data or you're not able or trained to exploit them in the right way. So there's a set of associations that went very early in that space and that have been a little bit abandoning it because they didn't know what to do with it. Now, especially with the virtual space and how easy it is to get these data, there's more associations that have gone in that space and are trying to understand what you can do with it. And that's where, again, the answer comes into twofolds. Because when you get data, the first set, what you can do with it is have logistical data. How many people, at what time, what was the peak, what was the most attended sessions, and so on. And those are really logistical data that in reality are useful just after, they might be useful 2 or 3 years. And then once you have a trend and a tendency, you don't really need to refresh them more than every 3 or 4 years. And that's because you're talking about data about the past. At MCI, we're looking at data for the future. Because the more, looking at artificial intelligence, looking at collecting data, you kind of get that hint, and that's exactly what we were talking about when we talked about, pushing or suggesting content to participants, starting to think about, how we can better serve the industry and the participants, not in that order, maybe first the participant and then the industry, in providing them with the best possible experience. So Gina, if I know you like this, and this, and I know you're available on that day, and that day, and that you don't like this, but you love that, and you know that person, I could kind of start predicting what you're going to be consuming. And I could start, even pushing you in the right direction, not because I want to sell you something, but because I kind of want to, in the vast volume of content that is available, either online or face-to-face or both, I want to ensure that you have a good understanding and knowledge of what's available and what's the most relevant to you, right? Many associations didn't take that step yet, especially because it's first of all a little bit, cutting edge, but also still rather expensive in terms of technology, in the sense that you need an AI, you need to be able to collect a lot of information before making it happen. But I'm absolutely convinced that this is the future. That's the way Netflix works, by the way.
And final topic before we go to the closure, sustainability was one of the elements that you mentioned. How do you see the importance of sustainability through all that has happened recently?
Well, I think that is surprisingly not not aligned, on a worldwide perspective. So I was having that conversation recently. We've been having COP26 in Europe recently, in Glasgow, and it's been a hot topic for kind of a month, because of the logistics, but also because of people traveling with private air, with private jet. Going to COP26 was a bit tricky, so I was kind of hot in the news, and it was a hot topic to discuss. And what was interesting, is to see that first of all, that is a topic that anyway is becoming increasingly important. So that's the first thing, So whether we like it or not, and again, I think it's the right way to go, but sustainability is becoming an increasingly important topic across all industries, but starting with the meeting travel industry and the congress industry. Second thing is that I was talking about it because in Europe, we have all sorts of initiatives, around sustainability, limiting this, increasing that, and so and so. And I was talking with colleagues from MCI from other parts of the world, that were telling me, well, in reality, you kind of don't realize it, but us, and it was really mainly colleagues that were talking from not LATAM, but from APAC, from Asia Pacific, and we're saying, well, I mean, seen from our perspective, that's really a Northern Hemisphere issue that we're not really concerned with in Asia Pacific, which was, it was offering a different vision. Now, understanding that the vision and the sensitivities might be different all across the world, there are still realities that remain. The realities that remain are, first, that sustainability is a hot topic and will become hotter and hotter. So that's a fact. Second thing is that as it is becoming a hot topic, the industry at large is getting more and more interested into that. And we as PCOs, as an example, or as agencies, get more and more requests from customers saying, well, I used to be lightly interested by the topic of sustainability in the sense that we are associations, so we're already devoted to the well-being of the community. So what more do you want us to do? Well, that was sufficient, and it seems not to be sufficient anymore. So we're getting more and more requests from that. But the reality is that sustainability can even become a tool for your event to grow and be, as an example, financially more performing, in the sense that, and we were having that discussion as an example with the industry, and the industry was saying, well, with all this kind of sustainability, we're going to invite less participants. It's like, okay, so but why would you invite less participants? Why wouldn't you invite more, but then be more granular to those that you invite face to face and those that you invite virtual? Because in reality, all of this, all of congresses, especially around science, are happening for the sake of spreading knowledge. So the greater the number, the better for everybody. So even the industry is getting to the point, to the understanding that while sustainability can be considered as a negative thing, it's not only a limiting factor, it can be also a positive factor that is increasing the reach of associations.
Thank you so much for the food for thought that you shared there.